Greetings, ghoul friends. It's your humble local Chicago spookster, Aaron Eichscheid, here with a special treat. In case you missed the virtual book club featuring myself, my book, Scry for Help, a novella of grief, hosted by Bonus Round Game Cafe, it is our mutual pleasure to be haunting the book club to your screen. That's right, it was recorded, and we are now happy to continue the discussion about love, resurrection, and the other side. Queer horror must live on forever, and as this Pride Month has continued to change for the entire world, we want to keep the love and the scares alive for everyone in the world as we continue to stay home, stay safe, and honestly read a lot more. So please follow along into the video where we discuss just a few topics about the book in case you have read it or not, or it might just prompt you to read it. And also, please leave any comments that you may have about it in the comment section. I'll be more than happy to answer them. And pick up a copy of Scry for Help today at bookshop.org, amazon.com, or at many Chicago bookstores. Follow the jump after the video to get all those wonderful locations and continue to support small independent business. And one more humble ask from an independent author. If you have read the book, or if you are planning to, please leave us a rating, whatever star you feel is correct or in your heart, because it not only helps other people find the book, it also helps us authors know how we're doing. So please enjoy the book club, and please enjoy the book, and happy screaming.
All right.
Let's do it.
Admit all. Hello, everyone.
Good evening. Hello.
Hey.
Welcome, Zoomers.
So I'm going to go ahead and mute you guys. That way there's no talking over each other that can happen in these types of meetings. And then feel free to type into chat. Aaron and I both have the chat up. And yeah, we'll answer questions that way and stuff like that. So beautiful. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. In case you don't know me, I'm Courtney, one of the owners of Bonus Round. Thanks for joining us. This is a good friend, Aaron, who is also a local author. So Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Aaron Eichscheid, if we haven't met before. And I got into writing when I was probably in elementary school. It just, something about putting words down in a creative fashion and coming up with something completely out of left field was always of interest. I was always kind of an oddball kid, but always found like telling fantasy and seeing fantasy very interesting, and would often just kind of spew out random stories to people whether or not they were listening, and fortunately was encouraged by elementary school teachers at the time to start putting that down on paper, and that resulted in some short stories that I've since read, and they're really bad, but it was at least trying to think outside the box and get creative and not look at the world in a not so normal way. Like look at normalcy and tell it in a way that makes sense to you, and then maybe in turn makes sense to somebody else, because sometimes thinking in the abstract really helps break down reality for us. And so my love for writing really evolved from that. And also something very important, if you haven't seen my shirt yet, say hello to Vincent Price here. He's very glad to be here from Beyond the Grave, horror icon. But being a horror nerd for a also very long time, since 8 years old, after seeing John Carpenter's Halloween on a Blockbuster VHS that I snuck in the house. It was contraband at the time, but the attraction to something terrifying really hit at that time. It scared me to death. I had nightmares, and yet, as all horror fans who truly love the genre do, they sadomasochistically come back. and start finding more things that scare them and more and more. And so that that love for being scared and looking into darkness really changed me as a person growing up, and fusing that love for creativity and the macabre and the strange really brought my passion for writing, because it felt like a normal way to explain how I feel, how I look at things, and of the world around us is a horrifying place, but we can process it very much through horror and through terror, and the supernatural. You can look at, for instance, this is a ghost story that we are discussing tonight. Ghosts can tell us everything about us as people, about experiences, about how we emote, and even how we perceive everything around us, time, space, our souls, all of that. So that's kind of me in a nutshell where writing came from. I've always been a weirdo, and just kind of started discovering more and more as I grew up.
Nice. Speaking of it being a ghost story, do you have favorite types of horror? Is ghost, supernatural stuff kind of one of your preferred things, or are you kind of a omnivore when it comes to horror?
I'm definitely an omnivore. There are some off-limit areas, as with every fandom. There's so many subsections, and horror definitely has them. Like I'm not really a rape revenge person at all. Don't understand it. Don't like it. But ghosts, definitely. Haunting is very real. And yes, I do believe in them. I've had experiences, and we can talk about that later. But ghosts and paranormal are very interesting. They're so moody and atmospheric. It truly immerses you. A good ghost story takes you into the environment and into the ghosts themselves. And then monster movies are very special. Literary adaptations like Vincent Price in like the Edgar Allan Poe films, so something very gothic and kind of that also swoops you and makes you feel something very special. And then slasher films are also very influential because they weren't afraid to get bloody, and blood can be a beautiful thing, guys. It really can when it's done artful. It is truly a wonderful thing. And slasher films, of course, knew how to get super creative. And then especially into the 1980s, as practical effects evolved, artists and filmmakers were able to take that blood and actually make some very graceful art. I'm a huge Clive Barker fan, for whom the book is actually dedicated. He taught me a lot of what I know. I am very fortunate to have been a student of his at one point.
Oh, wow.
Yep, I learned from him at my undergrad college career. Got to spend several times and occasions out in Beverly Hills at his home, and got to know him, and he opened up his world very graciously to me and showed what an imagination as dark and delicate as it can be really has in terms of potential.
I haven't read a ton of his stuff, but there was a graphic novel adaptation of The Thief of Always that just like absolutely stuck with me. It was incredible.
Amazing book. And I've got next to me one of my favorites of his that really inspired me to start writing, especially novellas and short fiction. What he started with, The Books of Blood, which are highly recommended. You can get them in an omnibus. Some are short, some are longer, and they're funny, they're scary, they're violent, they're sexy, they're everything. And he shows you that horror is very much it's a very well-rounded and developed genre beyond people's expectations, and he really subverted it in literature. So this is essential reading for especially modern day horror. And there is actually a graphic novel adaptation called Tapping the Vein that also shows you how artists have interpreted his work, is pretty incredible.
Nice. So let's go ahead and start talking a little bit about Scry for Help. What was your inspiration for it?
A dream, believe it or not. Sounds cliche, but it's true. Dreams are very important, and for those who we're lucky to have ones that are vivid and can remember them, because some are just like you wake up like, oh, that elephant left the room quick. But there are some that stick with you, and this one did start with a dream. It began as one of those. I don't know if any of you have ever had one of those waking dreams, like very lucid experiences where you can almost feel like you're in the dream. This was one of those, and it was completely from that fixed point of view, very much how the book opens. And it was looking up out of one of those very old cast iron bathtubs, if you've ever seen one of those. That you see in old movies, and I was in it and could feel the warm water, like could actually feel sitting in warmth. And on the edge of this bathtub was this beautiful man. Had no idea who he was, where he came from, why he was there. He didn't remind me of anybody I ever knew, but he was just very, very gorgeous. And I felt it was very magnetic. And he just sat there kind of looking very enigmatic. He didn't want anything. He was just present, and there was something remarkable about that presence. And he slid into the bathtub, could feel it, and could feel the water part, and he got in real close, and then I woke up, and that was it. But I remember waking up and feeling like something had come to reach out, like that warm feeling. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling like losing it at the same time. It left. And I actually felt some longing for that, because something was missing out of it. And so I kind of held on to that dream. It was so vivid that it didn't leave me for days. And so I wrote it down, because one tip that I have learned is write everything down, no matter what. Even if it's a scrap like that, write it down, because you'll come back to it and find something there. And that's where this story came from. It's like, why this feeling of longing? Who was this person? And then let's think about this loss and and if it's actually a loss. And so it started becoming a meditation on grief, grieving, and like the ghost of that. And so developed a story around it of looking at someone who lost something that they had, didn't really realize what they had until it was gone, and then had to process that through a very difficult phase. And through writing it, started thinking about the subject of death and dying, which is, of course, a very difficult emotion to grasp for a lot of people. And personally, it's very difficult to grasp. It's something that isn't pleasant to think about, but this story of loss helps meditate on my own feelings of somebody you love gone, or are they? And also if there's a right or a wrong way, or many ways for somebody to grieve over death. And so kind of combined all that into a ghost story, so we can kind of have this conversation about, is anybody really ever gone? And yes, there is a very wrong way to grieve, but also it looks different for everybody, and that we can all kind of come together through it. So that's sort of how the story began and evolved through the process.
Nice. I'm going to go ahead and ask Miranda's question, because I feel like it works really well with what we were talking about. When researching for the book, did you consider any other supernatural ways for Nate to communicate with Jamie before arriving at scrying?
That's a very good question, Miranda. And yes, there were multiple ways, because there's a lot of ways to communicate with the other side, especially you start researching and there's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. It's pretty remarkable, a lot of the methods people have tried or and used or researched for it. And I didn't want to go the traditional route of just like ghosts showing up. Mm-hmm. Like this, and also this does deal with unfinished business, which is a big theme in ghost stories. Like ghosts often haunt because of that. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to kind of move beyond that. And yes, there's unfinished business, but also ghosts are always kind of around. They might finish their business, but they don't just disappear like Patrick Swayze at the end of Ghost. You know, they don't go to the shiny place at the end. But their scrying seemed like the most fun, and also because the first one that that really came to me was the mirror, which ended up in the book, because mirrors are our gateway into our set, like our reflections into ourselves. And so looking at mirrors and was thinking, okay, is there a ritual involved with this? And did consider possibly like incantations or something more witchy, but it didn't seem to fit with a story like this, that it would turn into something entirely different. So divination and scrying became the mode of communication, because it's a good way for the main character and also the other characters to look into themselves, like to start. It's a very introspective process, and also can be seen as he might be seeing what he chooses to see in the mirror, in the scrying, because a lot of it is tethering yourself to whatever object that you were using to try and summon this person. So it started kind of at incantations and more ritualistic, but then became something more, a little more emotionally cored.
Yeah, I like that. And it does feel like you're saying, it's introspective. He didn't really know what he was losing, and so then he's using this mirror and looking at not only Jamie but himself, and like sussing with or wrestling with all of that. So
exactly. And also mirrors are always a fun device to use in horror and other stories, because they hold a lot of infinite possibilities. There's a great film from 1987. It's a good John Carpenter B flick that deserves a lot of attention, called Prince of Darkness. And they use mirrors as a device in that film. And it's a way that Satan comes back and at the end of the movie. And through the mirror, they gaze into it, and they literally pull it out through this pool. The glass pools, and they start to pull this creature out. And so it's a very fun visual metaphor as well. But also you can use it for a lot of mischief and things that come back through the looking glass at us. That might, in the case of like Prince of Darkness and other stories, is something that might be always looking back at you. Like we see reflection. What if it's actually something else that's always watching back there? It's an interesting concept, and it's really spooky to think about. Trust me, when writing this, there were nights, because you're pondering and everything. Yeah. Looking in a mirror was kind of terrifying for a little bit, because I'm trying not to see what's in the book there and don't want anything to come out, because sometimes when you kind of write some of this stuff, you're always afraid, oops, I hope I don't will anything, unfortunately.
Right.
You don't want anything popping out unexpected, especially at night when you're by yourself. No, thank you.
And then we'll go ahead and answer Brad's question too. Why Virgil for the surprise heroic appearance toward the end?
Surprise Virgil, why not? When in doubt, throw in the Greeks, right? Yes. So Virgil is the author of, or not the author, but the main character in Dante's Inferno, and is the guide down into hell. And so at the beginning of the book, of course, is a quote from the Divine Comedy and the descent into hell. And hell, so another aspect of this story that's very important to look at, and something that's very influential to myself in a lot of the work that I do and think about, is what is hell like in a not just in a physical sense, but in a metaphorical sense for all of us. And Virgil shows up because he's he's Nate's guide out of this personal hell. Like he dug himself into this journey into his own personal inferno, and a lot of the stories actually follows a similar structure. One of the sequences that was very fun to write, one, because I actually work in downtown Chicago and I've seen these office buildings and they do feel like the inferno sometimes, but there's a descent down an emergency stairwell that Nate goes down and feels like he's actually trudging down into the next circle, and it kind of shows his own descent into possible insanity. He's making himself go into insanity, and see the world around him as a hellscape. And so Dante's Inferno is sort of a parallel journey that he shares with that story, and there's a lot of characters and instances in that hell that he creates for himself that show up. And in the Inferno, there's a lot of allegory about wrath, pride, all of that. And these are things that when we are grieving, we feel a lot of these emotions that we encounter in the descent into the Inferno, and wanted to introduce a lot of us as characters or ideas that he'll encounter along the way. An entire section, part 4 of the book, is called The Other Side. And it means not only are we on the other side of the supernatural, because the phantasm has come out and taken Nate's life over, but it's also the other side of his grieving. It's everybody else that's been affected. And that includes his pride of not being able to get through this, the anger, the wrath of other people that are very mad about this with him, and either with him or at him, around him. And then there's also just the general daze that is hell and being trapped there. And so Virgil shows up to get him out, like literally rescue him. And it would also, just being a creature person, I'm going to be totally honest, needed something that would, you gotta have, when you, there's the phantasm, which is already a spooky image, this black negative figure, very jagged, and something you never want and never to come out. It's very amorphous and it can do just about anything. You need something to counteract that, to get it back out, because clearly these people are, they're going through grief and everything, and they've got the ghost stuff, like they wrought their own haunting and everything. They're not going to get it out by themselves. They're not professionals. They're not Ghostbusters. So we needed something a little stronger to come back and also have some fun, because it's an emotional story. Got it, and it's also a horror story. And some of the best horror isn't afraid to pull some monster punches here. So Virgil shows up to serve those two functions, and it was kind of fun to make him Lovecraftian a little bit, like Cthulhu Virgil come out with tentacles and everything. Like, I'm gonna get you. Like, you guys, you got yourself in this mess. I'll get you out. I don't really care about you, but I'm here to help. So that in a nutshell is Virgil's surprise heroic experience.
Nice. So I think we've got about 10 minutes or so until Zoom kicks us out.
Okay.
So I want to go ahead and answer David's question. What is significant about the cover art? I know the artist is a local artist here. They're also queer, if I remember correctly.
They're a queer artist. Their name is Loren Greenblatt. They do truly phenomenal art, digital and by hand. This drawing was commissioned. I've known them for several years through the indie art and film scene here in Chicago, and literally just asked them, read the story and give me something queer and give me something haunting, but also something that blends the two. And a month later, this was hand drawn and then digital, and then put into digital, and then altered from there to get this beautiful scape. And this sprang from their mind. And I couldn't have asked for anything better, because it's the beauty of Jamie, who is the character who is lost in the book, the ghost, and the eroticism of him, but also the beautiful essence that is left behind, and also kind of the crying out of that spirit. It's combining all of that into one image to really look at the horror of losing, not just someone losing someone, but also losing themselves. Mm-hmm. This is somebody who is gone, a beautiful soul that is still very beautiful, but is about to go through something very tormenting because this is how life ended for them, and this is where it begins. And so got a nice little strand of ecto going on here coming out of the mouth. It's almost a little vomity and everything, but also the beautiful rendering, and also the color scheme is the last piece of importance, because Jamie was a watercolor artist, and so his soul is represented in the color scheme of his ghost, and really makes him stand out and helps realize what he meant to Nate, our character. So I do love this cover art very much, and this was very much them. This came completely original out of them, and could not be happier with it.
Yeah, it really fits the tone and the feel of the book really well. Like, you look at that art and you start reading and you're like, oh yeah, these are like perfectly mashed up.
Thank you. Yes, this book was an incredible experience to write. Took about 6 months, and a couple of writers' retreats, and a lot of red pen editing, music, movies that got involved. Have very much, like I said, Clive Barker's inspiration to thank. Also the work of David Lynch, Mulholland Drive in particular, especially when it came to kind of the dreamy feel of the book, and getting into the mindset of somebody who is lost in a daze. Mulholland Drive is a great experience for that, and also how puzzling it can really be. Yeah. It takes about 20 viewings of that film to make any sense of it. It finally does make sense, but it's always good to have that going. I do have to show this. Music is very random for me, and also when it comes to writing. But if you ever get a chance, ABBA, The Visitors, their last album, this was actually a very important album when writing this. It was when the band broke up and was singing about divorce and about moving on, and there's some great music on here, and it really got into the mood, particularly the song One of Us. And then finally, our punk rock goddess, Susie and the Banshees. Their album Superstition, with the song that closes it, The Ghost in You, really also set a mood, and her voice, of course, will haunt you, move you, and make you want to rock out. So lots of things that went into this. So I'm very grateful to be around all this inspiration and be able to share it with everybody, and hopefully say something meaningful and start a conversation in the community.
Beautiful. If you want to go ahead and unmute and say anything or ask Aaron anything, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone? No pressure.
I'm friendly, I promise.
He doesn't bite. Cool. Well, we still have copies of the book available at the cafe that you can order. If you want to get a copy for a friend or something like that, we'll probably keep them in the store until whenever. So
it's a great gift. It's time to show queer community and queer horror this time of year.
Exactly.
At a parades, let's get people reading books, and because honestly, there's a lot of room in the queer community to talk about grieving and grief and
absolutely,
and ghosts, and really, and us horror people are cool too, and we all need to come together in the community to be able to show that, and I'm very proud to be a part of it, and always on the lookout for more. There's a lot of great queer horror out there, and I'm very proud to be part of the conversation. But this month, let's really show them that we're a significant portion of the community too, and have a lot to say.
Yeah, and then go ahead and follow Aaron's production company, Paradigm Shift. And do you want to tell us anything about what you are finishing up right now?
Absolutely. So I'm currently working on a new collection. Quarantine has been very creative. I mean, what else are you gonna do? But have been actually working on a new collection, and I'm currently editing 2 new stories that are about novella length. One of them is related to the Catholic Church sex abuse scandals that meets Shapeshifters. So fun there, you know. And then another one is about private education and queer identity, and the horrors related. I'm revisiting an old story that I've worked on, looking at that, and we will see how they come together. But that's currently what I am editing in the office right now.
Nice.
Yes, and just watching whatever horror movies come my way that seem good and don't drive you completely insane. Like, be careful when you watch The Shining in isolation, because you do not want to end up at the New Year's party, okay? Don't do it, please. But there's a lot of good stuff to watch and listen to. Don't forget to listen to something happy too, like keep the horror alive, but also find something that makes you laugh. And when in doubt, there's always share.
Good last words, I'd say.
I am first and foremost a gay man, so I will always promote her.
I mean, why not, right?
She is God.
All right. I unplugged the camera, but we're wrapping up anyways. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And yeah.
Any questions you have on our Facebook page on Paradigm Shift Productions, or Strive for Help also has a Facebook page. There will be a post going up that you can follow and ask any questions. I'm always around to answer them, more than happy to. And please tell your friends about the book. It's available at Bonus Round Cafe and also at various local bookstores here in Chicago, and also on bookshop.org, which supports indie bookshops across the entire country. All sales go out in a pool to them, and I'm very happy to share in that with them because they need our help right now.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch, Aaron.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Please stay safe. Much love to you, and look forward to hopefully talking to you again soon.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.